The ice was never meant to break, and she was never meant to wake up. Deep in the frozen wasteland, a child kneels in the snow, her breath shaky, her hands trembling. Behind her, her mother lies still, too still. She knows the truth. She's alone, but she can't cry. She mustn't cry, because her mother once whispered a warning: if you cry, it will know where you are. And then, the first tear falls. The ice hisses, burns, cracks. Something ancient stirs beneath her feet. Something that has been waiting for her, waiting for this moment. And as the sky darkens, as the ground begins to shake, she realizes the truth. She was never running from it. She was running toward it. And now, it's awake. The cold cut deep, not just the kind that settled on the skin, but the kind that seeped into the bones, hollowed you out from the inside, the kind that made breathing feel like swallowing glass. And yet, she knelt there, in the snow, her hands pressed together, her small fingers stiff and pale from the chill. She had been told not to cry. That was the only rule. And for as long as she could remember, she had obeyed. But now she was failing. Her mother lay in the snow behind her, unmoving. The soft fabric of her cloak was slowly stiffening in the cold, frost creeping along the edges. Her dark hair spread around her like ink spilled on the frozen ground. Her breathing was shallow, too shallow, and the girl knew. She wasn't waking up. A gust of wind ripped through the frozen wasteland, stirring loose flurries of snow into the air. It was silent here. No trees rustling, no animals scurrying, just the howl of the wind and the quiet, unsteady rhythm of her mother's failing breath. She squeezed her eyes shut, tried to focus, tried to push the panic away. "You are strong," her mother had always told her. "You must be strong, because you are the last." Her hands shook, not from the cold, but from the feeling rising inside her chest. The feeling she had been taught to fear more than anything else. She couldn't stop it this time. Her chest was too tight, her throat ached, her vision blurred. And then, the first tear fell. The second it hit the snow, a hiss filled the air. A sharp, unnatural sound, like water spilling onto a burning stove. The snow where the tear had fallen darkened, sizzling. Then, it melted straight through the ice, burning a perfect hole in the frozen ground. A thin tendril of black smoke curled upward from the hole, dissolving into the cold air. She stared at it, swallowed hard. No, not now, not here. She clenched her fists, forcing herself to breathe evenly. Her mother had always told her, "Your tears are not like theirs. They are not meant for sorrow. They are meant for something else." But she didn't know what, because she had never let herself cry before, until now. And now it was too late. She tried to wipe her face with trembling fingers, tried to stop the tears before they could do more damage. But it was like trying to stop a storm with her bare hands. One by one, the tears kept falling, and everywhere they touched the snow, the same thing happened. The ground burned. She scrambled backward, heart pounding. Beneath the ice, something shifted. Not just melting, something was moving. The girl's breath caught. She wasn't alone. Something was waking up. A sound echoed through the emptiness. Low, deep, like the groan of something ancient shifting beneath the surface. The ground beneath her feet trembled, and she realized she had made a mistake. In the distance, beyond the thick curtain of falling snow, shadows moved. Dark figures, tall, cloaked in the storm, watching. She knew who they were. The ones who had hunted her people to extinction. The ones her mother had tried to keep her hidden from. And now, she had led them right to her. She turned back to her mother, grabbing at her arm, shaking her gently. "Please, please wake up." No response. She could hear the crunch of boots on snow. They were coming. The girl's chest tightened, her breath coming in sharp, panicked gasps. Her body knew what was coming next. Her blood remembered. She was out of time. She was out of choices. And then, a voice. "Don't cry, little one." A low, steady voice, deep and unfamiliar. Not the hunters, not her mother, someone else. She snapped her head up, and there he was. A man stood just beyond the snowdrifts, wrapped in heavy furs, his face obscured beneath the hood of a long coat. He was watching her, but not with the cruelty of the hunters, not with the distant, detached stares of those who had come to kill. There was something else in his gaze, something she didn't understand, something that made her want to believe. "You don't belong here," he said, stepping closer. "And neither do they." He flicked his gaze toward the approaching shadows. "I can help you, but you have to listen to me." Her hands tightened into fists. The ground beneath her was still burning, shifting, whispering. The hunters were almost here. She had never trusted a stranger before, but if she didn't now, she would not survive. She met his gaze, took one slow, shaky breath, and whispered, "Help me." The storm howled around them, tearing through the barren wasteland. The man stood completely still, his eyes locked on hers. The girl didn't move either. She could barely breathe, because the ground beneath her was still burning, and the hunters were getting closer. "We don't have time for this." The man's voice was low, steady, calm despite the storm, despite the danger. "If you want to live, you come with me, right now." The girl's hands trembled at her sides. She wanted to run, wanted to grab her mother and pull her to safety. But there was no safety, not for them, not anymore. She turned to her mother, shaking her again, desperate. "Wake up," she whispered. "Please wake up." But there was no response, no movement, only the slow, terrible stillness of someone who would never wake again. A sharp crack split through the night, the sound of ice breaking. The man stiffened, and the girl felt it too. Something was shifting beneath the ground, something big, something old, and her tears had woken it up. She didn't understand what was happening, but she understood one thing. She couldn't stay here. She turned back to the man, her lips parted, to ask a question, to beg for help. But then, the first shot rang out. The air exploded with sound. A pulse of energy ripped through the storm, slicing through the wind like a blade. The girl flinched, instinctively throwing herself to the ground. The man moved instantly, faster than she expected. He grabbed her wrist, pulling her behind him. "Stay low," he ordered. Another shot. A beam of searing red light slammed into the snow inches from where she had been standing. The heat melted the ice in an instant. She could feel it, blistering against her skin, against her bones. The hunters were here. She heard them moving through the snow, slow, deliberate. They didn't need to hurry because they thought she was cornered, and they were right. The man crouched beside her, one hand reaching into his coat. "When I say run, you run?" She looked at him, her heart hammering. "But my mother?" "Your mother is gone." His voice was sharp, not cruel, but like he needed her to understand, needed her to listen. "If we don't move now, you'll be too." Her throat tightened. Another shot, closer this time. She nodded. She didn't trust him, not yet, but she had no other choice. "Now!" The man moved first. He threw something, small, metallic, into the air. It exploded instantly, a burst of white smoke billowing outward. The hunters shouted in alarm. The girl didn't hesitate. She ran. The world blurred around her. Her feet slammed against the ice, kicking up snow with every step. The man was just ahead of her, moving fast. Too fast for a normal human. She had questions. So many questions. But they would have to wait because the hunters were still behind them. And something else, something much, much worse, was waking beneath the ground. The girl ran. The cold wind slashed against her face, her breath coming in sharp gasps. She could hear the hunters behind her, moving fast, shouting orders. But they weren't the worst part. No, the worst part was beneath them, beneath the snow, beneath the ice. Something was moving. The man ahead of her was fast, too fast for a normal human. His heavy boots barely left tracks in the snow, his body cutting through the storm like it wasn't even there. She tried to keep up, but her legs were burning, her chest tight, her vision blurred from exhaustion. "Keep going," the man shouted over the wind. "We're almost there." Almost where? She didn't know, but she couldn't stop now, because behind them, the hunters were catching up. Then, a sound, a deep, inhuman groan. Not from the hunters, not from the storm, from below. The girl's breath caught in her throat. She glanced down, and then she saw it. The snow was cracking, not from their footsteps, not from the hunters' shots. Something else. The ground beneath her shifted, like something huge was pushing against it from below. A heartbeat, a pulse, a thing that shouldn't be waking up. She felt her stomach twist. Her body knew what was coming, even if her mind refused to understand. And then, the first hand broke through the ice. She screamed. A massive, twisted limb erupted from the frozen ground, just a few feet behind her. Black, clawed, dripping with something too dark, too thick to be blood. The hunters shouted in panic, their weapons shifting from her to it. But they were too late. It was already climbing free. "Run!" the man yelled. The girl didn't need to be told twice. She sprinted forward, her legs barely holding her upright. Behind her, the thing dragged itself out of the ice. Its form was impossible. Not solid, not liquid. Something shifting, twisting, writhing. A thing not meant for this world. And the second it touched the air, the sky turned black. The hunters started firing wildly. Bright red energy blasts cut through the storm, illuminating the night in violent flashes. But the thing didn't stop. It didn't slow down. It didn't even acknowledge them. Because it wasn't after them. It was after her. The girl felt something pulling at her chest. Not physically, not like hands grabbing her, but like a thread being pulled loose from deep inside her soul. The thing knew her. It had been waiting for her. And now, it was awake. She stumbled forward, barely keeping herself from falling into the snow. "Where are we going?" she gasped. The man didn't look back. "Away from that thing." "What is it?" His jaw clenched. Something that should have stayed buried. Behind them, the hunters were dying. One by one, their screams were cut short. The girl didn't look back. She couldn't, because she knew if she did, she wouldn't be able to stop looking. Because some things weren't meant to be seen. And some things, once you saw them, they never let you go. The man grabbed her hand, pulling her toward a ridge in the distance. "Faster!" She tried, she really did. But she could feel it behind her now. Feel it inside her bones. And she knew this wasn't over. This was just the beginning. The girl's lungs burned. Her legs screamed with every step, but she couldn't stop. Not with that thing behind them. Not with its twisted, formless limbs clawing their way out of the ice. Not with the way the air itself felt wrong. Thick, heavy, almost vibrating. Like reality was trying to reject whatever had just woken up. The stranger pulled her forward, moving with a speed that wasn't natural. His grip was firm, but not harsh. Like he knew she was barely holding on. Like he needed her to keep moving. "There's a ridge ahead," he said, voice steady but tense. "If we can make it there, we might have a chance." A chance? A chance at what? Nothing could stop that thing. She knew that. She could feel it. It wasn't something that could be killed. It wasn't something that could even be hurt. It was something else. Something older. Something that had been waiting for her. She chanced a glance behind her and instantly regretted it. The hunters were gone. Not dead, not torn apart. Just gone. Like they had never been there at all. Like the snow had swallowed them whole. The thing in the ice had taken them. And it wasn't done. It was still coming. Still pulling itself free. And worse, it was watching her. She could feel its attention. Not sight, not like eyes. Something deeper. Like it could see inside her. Like it was looking at something buried in her bones, her blood, her soul. And she knew. It wasn't just chasing her. It was calling to her. "We're almost there," the man said. She looked up. There, just ahead, the ridge. A steep drop-off into a frozen canyon. Jagged rocks jutting out of the ice below. No cover, no shelter, no escape. Her heart plummeted. "There's nowhere to go," she cried. "We're trapped." But the man didn't stop, didn't even hesitate. "Trust me," he said. And then he jumped. She screamed. For a brief, horrifying moment, he was gone, vanishing into the blizzard below. She skidded to a stop at the edge, heart hammering, eyes wide. Did he just... A hand shot up from below, gripping the edge of the ridge. The man pulled himself up just enough to look at her. "Jump!" he shouted. She stared down at him, at the sheer drop into nothing. Now, kid?" And behind her, the thing screamed. It wasn't a sound, not really, not something she could hear with her ears, but she felt it, deep inside her skull, a terrible, consuming pull, like something was reaching into her mind, into her soul, dragging her toward it. Her knees buckled, her head throbbed. She wasn't going to make it. She was going to fall, not forward, not into the canyon, but backward, into it, into the thing. And then he grabbed her. The man's arms wrapped around her as he yanked her off the ledge. And suddenly, they were falling. The wind rushed past them, ice and snow whipping against her face. She squeezed her eyes shut, heart hammering. And then, impact. Hard, but not as hard as it should have been. She opened her eyes. They had landed on a narrow ledge, carved into the rock just beneath the ridge. Above them, the thing loomed at the top of the cliff, pulsing, shifting, watching. It didn't move closer, didn't jump after them. It just waited, like it knew something she didn't, like it wasn't in a hurry, like it knew she would come back. And somehow, that was worse. The man let go of her, exhaling hard. "You good?" She stared at him. "You threw me off a cliff." A ghost of a smirk crossed his face. "You're welcome." She almost hit him, but instead, she just sank to her knees, trembling, hands clenched into fists. "What is it?" she whispered. The man didn't answer right away, just stared up at the ridge, at the thing that was still watching. Then finally, "I don't know," he looked at her, "but I know it wants you." The girl's breath came in sharp gasps, her chest burning. She could still feel it. Even from here, even from the ledge far below, she could feel the thing watching, not moving, not chasing, just waiting. And somehow, that was worse. The man stood beside her, his eyes still fixed on the ridge above. He didn't seem afraid, not like her, but she could see the tension in his jaw, the way his shoulders were just a little too tight. He wasn't afraid, but he was worried, and that meant she should be too. "What now?" she asked, her voice small, hoarse. The man glanced at her. "Now?" He exhaled slowly, looking down at the canyon below. "Now we keep moving." The girl hesitated. She looked back up at the ridge, at the thing still perched there, its form shifting, twisting, never quite solid. It wasn't leaving, it wasn't giving up, but it wasn't coming down after them either. Why? What was it waiting for? "What if it follows?" she asked. The man's expression didn't change. "It won't." "How do you know?" He looked at her. "Because it doesn't need to." The words sent a chill down her spine. He wasn't saying they were safe. He was saying it didn't care that they ran, because it knew they'd come back. Or rather, she would. She swallowed hard. Her fingers curled into the fabric of her cloak. "It knows me," she whispered. The man nodded. "Yeah, it does." "Why?" A pause, a long one. Then, "That's what we need to find out." They moved. The path down the canyon was steep, the rocks slick with ice. The wind howled through the empty space, filling the silence between them. The girl watched her step, careful not to slip. The man moved ahead, leading the way, his pace quick but not rushed, like he knew exactly where he was going. She should have asked, should have demanded to know who he was, what he wanted, why he helped her. But her mind was still stuck on the thing on the ridge, still stuck on the way it had just let them go. "Where are we going?" she asked finally. "Somewhere safe." She frowned. "Nowhere is safe." The man didn't argue. He just kept walking, which only made her feel worse. The canyon walls stretched high above them, the sky a dark, swirling blur of snow and clouds. They walked for what felt like hours, their boots crunching against the frozen ground. The deeper they went, the darker it became. The wind still howled above, but down here, it was too quiet, like the world itself was holding its breath, like something was waiting for them. "We're close," said the man muttered. The girl glanced at him. Close to what? Answers. She didn't like that answer. Not at all. But she didn't get the chance to say so. Because at that moment, the ground shook. A deep, low vibration rolled through the canyon, rattling the ice, sending loose rocks tumbling from above. The girl froze. So did the man, and then a sound, a voice, not hers, not his, not from anywhere she could see. It was inside her head, a whisper, soft, ancient. "You should not have left." Her blood turned to ice, because it wasn't just a voice. It was the thing. It was talking to her. Her knees buckled. She clutched her head, trying to push it out, push it away. "Stop!" she gasped. "Stop! Hey!" The man was at her side in an instant, gripping her shoulders, shaking her. "What's wrong?" She couldn't answer, because the voice was still there, still whispering. "Come back. Come home." And the worst part? Some part of her wanted to. The man shook her harder. "Focus, kid." Her vision blurred. Her chest felt tight. She couldn't breathe. "Listen to me," the man growled. "It's trying to get in your head. Fight it." But she didn't know how. She wasn't strong enough. She wasn't ready. "I can make it stop." The voice was softer now, almost gentle, almost familiar. And then, for the first time, it called her by name. Lyrian. Her whole body went still. She had never told anyone her name. Not the hunters, not the man, not anyone. So how did it know? How did it remember? Unless it had always known. The man watched her carefully. "What is it saying?" She met his gaze, her heart pounding, and whispered, "It knows me." The canyon walls felt tighter now, like the world itself was closing in on them. The girl's breath came fast, shallow, her mind spinning, because the thing wasn't just watching anymore. It was whispering, calling her by a name she had never spoken aloud, a name she had almost forgotten. The man's grip tightened on her shoulder. "What did you say?" She swallowed hard, her mouth suddenly dry. "It knows my name." She saw it then, the slight shift in his expression. It was subtle, but it was there, and it sent a cold weight sinking into her stomach, because that meant he knew something too. "How?" she pressed. The man didn't answer, not right away. Instead, he turned, starting forward again, his pace faster now. "We need to keep moving." "No!" She planted her feet. She was done running blindly, done being dragged around like she didn't deserve answers. "Tell me what's happening. Tell me what that thing is. Tell me why it knows me." The man stopped, but he didn't turn around. For a long moment, he just stood there, staring at the path ahead. Then finally, "Because it's part of you," the words hit like a fist to the chest. The girl felt her whole body go cold. "That's not possible." "No?" He finally turned back to face her, eyes dark, unreadable. "Then why do you feel it?" Her breath hitched, because she did feel it. She had always felt it. Something in the back of her mind, in the pit of her stomach. Something she had thought was fear, but maybe it was something else. Maybe it was recognition. "What is it?" she whispered. The man exhaled. "A mistake." Her stomach twisted. "Mine?" A pause, then, "No, theirs." A sudden rumbling shook the ground beneath them. The girl staggered, gripping the icy wall of the canyon for balance. The man's jaw tightened. "We don't have much time." "Until what?" He met her gaze. "Until it stops waiting." She felt it again. The pull, not physical, not like a hand grabbing her, but like gravity itself had shifted toward the thing above. Like she was being reeled back in. Like no matter how far they ran, she was always meant to return. "It's waking up," she whispered. The man nodded. And it wants you back. She shook her head. This wasn't happening. This wasn't real. She wasn't part of that thing. She wasn't. But deep inside, some part of her knew. Some part of her had always known. Because her mother had told her. She just hadn't listened. You must never cry, Lyrian. Because if you do, the thing beneath the ice will know where you are. And she had cried. A roar split the sky, louder than thunder, louder than anything she had ever heard. The girl's heart slammed against her ribs, because she knew that wasn't just a sound, it was a name. Her name, being spoken by something that wasn't supposed to exist. And then, the ground cracked. The ground split open. A jagged crack tore through the ice, running beneath her feet, spreading outward in long, deep fractures. The girl stumbled back, heart pounding, but it was too late. She could feel it now. The thing wasn't just rising, it was remembering, and it was pulling her with it. The man grabbed her wrist. Lyrian, look at me. She tried to focus on him, tried to ignore the deep, terrible voice inside her head, calling her name over and over again. You are not lost. You were never lost. You were always meant to return. No, 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 no. Fight it, the man shouted. It's inside your head, but that doesn't mean it owns you. She gasped for air, her vision blurred. Everything felt too heavy, like gravity itself had changed around her, like she was being dragged into something bigger than herself, like she had been waiting for this moment all along. And then, the ice exploded. A wave of black mist surged up from the ground, writhing like a living thing. It had no shape, no face, only an endless, churning void. A hole in the universe where something older than time itself had been sleeping, waiting for her. Come back to us, child. You were never supposed to leave. You are the last. She couldn't move. The tendrils of mist curled toward her, twisting around her ankles, her wrists, her throat. And she felt it. The memories, the truth, who she really was, who she had been before, what she had forgotten. She had not been born. She had been created, the last of her kind, the last piece of an ancient weapon meant to unmake the universe. And when the war had ended, when everything had burned, the others had been erased, but not her. She had been hidden, buried beneath the ice, locked away where no one would ever find her, where she would never wake up, until now. Lyrian! The man's voice cut through the storm. She blinked. The mist was crawling up her arms, her legs pulling her toward the void. She was seconds away from disappearing, from becoming part of it again, from losing herself completely. You don't have to go with them, the man shouted. You don't belong to them. She wanted to believe him, but how could she? She had seen it, the truth inside the mist. She wasn't a person. She wasn't real. She was a weapon, and weapons didn't get to choose. The mist curled tighter. Come home. Her vision darkened. She was slipping, falling, and then a hand grabbed hers. A hand, not the mist, not the thing. Him, the man. His grip was solid, warm, human. Lyrian. His voice was softer now. You don't have to be what they made you. You can be more. She stared at him, at his eyes, at the way he wasn't afraid, the way he wasn't letting go. And for the first time, she felt something stronger than the pull of the void, stronger than the voice inside her head. She felt herself. She took a breath, a real one, a deep, steady breath that filled her lungs, that cleared her mind. Then, she tore herself free. The mist screamed, a terrible, deafening sound, like reality itself was ripping apart. She fell backward, crashing into the snow. The black tendrils writhing, thrashing, trying to grab her again. But she wouldn't let them, not this time, not ever again. The man pulled her up. Time to go. She nodded, and together, they ran. The mist surged after them, but it was weaker now. It had lost its hold on her. It was shrinking, collapsing back into itself. And as they reached the edge of the canyon, as they climbed up, away from the ruins below, she looked back one last time and saw the thing vanishing into the ice once more. It wasn't dead, it wasn't gone, but it had lost. For now, and she had won. For the first time in her life, she had chosen herself. They stood at the top of the ridge, breathing hard, looking down at the frozen wasteland below. "What now?" she asked, her voice quiet. The man glanced at her, the hint of a smirk tugging at his lips. "Now? We keep moving." She nodded, and together they walked into the storm, leaving the past buried in the ice, where it belonged.